If your maintenance light comes on, you probably do what most drivers do: head straight back to the dealership and brace yourself to spend a few $100s. If you hesitate, they scare you with the same warning every time. Don't change the oil now, and your engine could be next. But what if that whole story is built on a myth worth billions? Today, we're pulling back the curtain on the change your oil every 5,000 kilometers rule and the profit machine behind it. Better yet, I'm going to show you how to tell whether your oil is actually near the end of its life in just 30 seconds, with nothing more than a tissue. No more blindly following a sticker on the windshield. No more being treated like an easy mark. And if you're tired of repair shops using your car as their ATM, subscribe to the channel, because here we tell the truth. Service your car every 6 months or every 5,000 kilometers. That line has been repeated so many times, it's practically burned into every driver's brain. It doesn't matter whether you just got your license or you've been driving for 20 years. Most people accept that number without question. But have you ever stopped and asked where that 5,000 kilometer rule actually came from? To understand it, we need to go back to the 1970s, when mineral oil was the norm. Refining technology back then was nowhere near what it is now. Engine oils contained more impurities. Their oxidation resistance was weaker, and they broke down much faster under heat and stress. On top of that, engines themselves were built to looser tolerances. The gap between piston rings and cylinder walls was larger, which meant more blow-by gases and unburned fuel could seep into the crankcase and contaminate the oil. In that era, engine oil really did deteriorate quickly, and changing it every few thousand kilometers was a sensible, science-based recommendation. But this is 2026, not 1976. Technology has moved forward by half a century, and the oil going into modern engines is no longer that crude, unstable mineral oil of the past. Today, many drivers are using fully synthetic oils, engineered in laboratories with highly stable molecular structures, cleaner base stocks, and advanced additive packages designed to reduce wear, suspend contaminants, resist oxidation, and maintain viscosity under stress. Under normal driving conditions, a quality full synthetic oil can often go 10,000 kilometers, sometimes even 15,000, without losing its protective ability. That is not wishful thinking, and it is not marketing fantasy. It is supported by testing, oil chemistry, and the reality of how modern lubricants perform. The problem is that the people selling you maintenance already know this. The engineers know it. The service departments know it. The technicians know it. They just have no incentive to say it out loud. Why would they? A huge portion of service center profit comes from getting you to drain out oil that still has plenty of useful life left in it. Once you understand that, a lot of things start to make sense. The maintenance schedule in your owner's manual may look like it exists purely to protect your engine and your wallet, but the business side of the industry tells a different story. Many people assume car makers make their real money when they sell you a vehicle. In reality, margins on new cars are often far thinner than most drivers imagine. The real long-term profit often comes after the sale, by keeping you tied into the dealership's service ecosystem for years. It is the same business logic as selling the razor cheap and making money on the blades. The car gets you in the door. The service visits keep the revenue flowing. Over 5 or 10 years of ownership, recurring maintenance, consumables, and routine service appointments become the dependable income stream. Among all those service items, oil changes are one of the easiest, most frequent, and most profitable. Shops buy oil in bulk at costs far below what you would guess, then sell it back to you by the liter at a hefty markup, plus labor, plus inspections, plus whatever else they can add to the bill. If every driver using modern synthetic oil only returned when the oil's real service life was nearly used up, say every 10,000 or even 15,000 kilometers instead of every 5,000, many service departments would see their numbers get cut dramatically. Bonuses would shrink, revenue would drop. That is why the old 5,000 kilometer habit survives so stubbornly. It is not just tradition. It is profitable tradition, reinforced by fear, routine, and the average driver's uncertainty about how engines actually work. And then there is the maintenance light, the little symbol on your dashboard that instantly makes people nervous. Most drivers assume that modern cars are smart enough to know exactly when their oil has become dirty or degraded. They imagine some kind of sensor in the sump analyzing oil condition in real time, measuring acidity, contamination, metal content, or viscosity. In most cars, that is simply not what is happening. The vast majority of vehicles on the road do not have some magical oil laboratory built into the engine. In many cases, that maintenance light is nothing more than a countdown timer written into the car's computer. The system is programmed at the factory to trigger after a set amount of time or mileage, say 6 months or 5,000 kilometers, regardless of whether the oil is still healthy or already overdue. It does not care whether you spend your days cruising efficiently on the highway or inching through city traffic for 10 minutes at a time. It does not care whether the oil is still amber and effective or dark and exhausted. When the preset number is reached, the light comes on. That is all. So when the light appears, it does not automatically mean the oil is bad. It often means only one thing: the timer is expired. It is not your engine crying for help. It is a reminder built around a maintenance schedule. So if the dashboard cannot truly tell you when the oil is finished, and the service advisor has every reason to be conservative, how is an ordinary driver supposed to judge oil condition without sending samples to a lab? The answer is that you can actually learn a lot with simple, practical checks used by experienced people in the repair world, methods that are rarely explained to drivers because they make you less dependent on the shop. The first and most revealing method is a basic blotter spot test using the dipstick and a piece of white paper. Ideally, you would use filter paper, but a plain white tissue or napkin with a smooth surface and no embossed texture can work as well. Start by parking the car on level ground, shutting off the engine, and letting it sit for about 10 minutes so the oil drains back into the pan. Then open the hood, pull out the dipstick, wipe it clean, reinsert it, and pull it out again. Take the drop of oil at the tip and place it onto the paper. Then leave the paper somewhere flat and undisturbed for a few hours. Overnight is even better if you are using proper filter paper. As the oil spreads, it will form a circular stain that tells a story if you know what to look for. At the center is the deposit zone, where soot, carbon, tiny metal particles, and other contaminants accumulate. If the middle looks pitch black like ink and the edge is sharply defined, with little or no outward migration, that can indicate the dispersant additives are no longer doing their job and contaminants are settling out rather than staying suspended. In that case, the oil may truly be spent. Outside that is the diffusion zone, which is often the most useful part to study. If this area is broad and shows a gradual fade in color, light brown, yellow-brown, translucent amber, that usually suggests the additive package is still active and keeping contaminants dispersed, rather than allowing them to form sludge. As long as this diffusion ring remains visible and not so dark that it loses translucency altogether, the oil may still have meaningful service life left. The outermost ring is the oil ring. If that ring looks lightly tinted and clear, oxidation may still be under control. But if it appears unusually watery, extremely transparent, or the paper around it feels overly wet and soft, that can point to dilution from fuel or moisture, which reduces viscosity and weakens the oil's ability to protect the engine. That kind of contamination can justify changing the oil early. With one simple stain test, you can get a rough visual read on whether your oil is actually breaking down, instead of blindly obeying a mileage number. There's also a second check you can do anytime with your senses touch and smell. Pull the dipstick. Take a small amount of oil between your thumb and forefinger and rub it gently. Healthy oil should feel slick and smooth, almost like an ultra-thin protective film separating your fingers. What you should not feel is grittiness. If there is a noticeable sandy or abrasive texture, that may suggest an excessive load of suspended contaminants or wear particles, and that is a much more meaningful warning sign than a dashboard timer. Then slowly separate your fingers. A healthy oil with decent viscosity and film strength will usually show some cohesion, a slight stringing effect, however subtle. If it behaves like water and breaks instantly with no body at all, that can indicate the oil has sheared down and lost some of the viscosity needed to maintain a proper protective film under load. Smell matters too. Fresh or serviceable oil may have a mild chemical scent, maybe a slightly toasted odor, but it should not smell aggressively wrong. If it reeks of gasoline, that can indicate fuel dilution from incomplete combustion or repeated short trips. If it has a sour, acrid smell, oxidation may be advanced. If it smells burnt, you may be dealing with overheating or excessive thermal stress. Those are the moments when you do not just schedule an oil change. You investigate the engine more closely. And yes, lab reports back this up. Consider a very common example. A car running a typical commercially available 5W30 full synthetic oil that was driven 8,000 kilometers before the oil was sampled and analyzed. What do these reports often show? The total base number, or TBN, the key measurement of an oil's ability to neutralize acids, can still remain at a healthy level. Viscosity at operating temperature may still be within spec. Wear metals such as iron and aluminum may remain very low, indicating the engine is not suffering abnormal wear at all. In other words, the oil is not dead at 8,000 kilometers. In many cases, it is still doing exactly what it was designed to do. Draining it at 5,000 kilometers simply because that is what you have always been told can amount to pouring money straight into the waste tank. Now, let's be clear, none of this means you should stop maintaining your car, ignore service entirely, or stretch oil changes indefinitely just to save money. That would be foolish. Good maintenance is still essential. The point is not to replace one blind rule with another. The point is to think scientifically and pay attention to how the car is actually used. When people say a full synthetic oil can often last 10,000 kilometers or more, that usually assumes normal or favorable driving conditions. So what does normal really mean? It means regular trips long enough for the engine to fully warm up and stay at operating temperature, enough highway or open road driving to evaporate moisture and fuel contamination, and a general pattern of use that does not constantly stress the oil in abnormal ways. Under those conditions, oil can reach the service life it was engineered for. But if your driving falls into what manufacturers call severe service, then the old 5,000 kilometer advice may not be a myth at all. It may be reasonable protection. Severe service includes extremely frequent short trips, where the engine barely warms up before being shut off again. If you mostly use the car to drive 2 or 3 kilometers to pick up food, drop off the kids, or run errands around the neighborhood, the oil may never get hot enough to boil off moisture and fuel vapors. In that situation, dilution and condensation can build up inside the crankcase, and the oil can degrade much faster. Another severe condition is heavy idling. Taxi drivers, delivery drivers, or anyone who sits parked with the engine running and the air conditioning on for long periods is consuming oil life even when the odometer barely moves. In those cases, engine hours matter as much as mileage, sometimes more. Stop and go urban traffic, constant low-speed crawling, high dust environments, extreme heat, and repeated cold starts can all accelerate oil degradation too. So the real answer is not that every driver should switch from 5,000 kilometers to 15,000 overnight. The real answer is that oil change intervals should be based on the actual operating conditions of the vehicle and on observable evidence of oil condition, not on fear, habit, or service department convenience. That is the bigger point here. The service industry has taken a standard that made sense in the age of old mineral oils and older engines, then carried it forward into the era of modern full synthetics, as though nothing has changed. Why? Because it creates a beautifully effective cycle of fear-based marketing. Convince the driver that ignoring the sticker could destroy the engine, and the driver will hand over money without asking questions. But a car is supposed to serve you. You're not supposed to live in fear of it. The more you understand the machine, the less vulnerable you are to being manipulated by vague warnings and outdated rules. Once you know how to check your oil with a simple blotter test, once you know what healthy oil feels like between your fingers and what abnormal oil smells like, you start taking back control. The next time that maintenance light comes on, do not panic. Take a breath. Pull the dipstick. Look at the evidence. And make the decision based on the condition of the oil and the way you actually drive, not on a myth that has been making money off drivers for decades.